Welcome to the public section of Risk and Assurance. Firstly, do we have any apologies? We would have none. From the Chair, I'll confirm the agenda. And note the public forum. Let's move to item 4, minutes of the Risk and Assurance meeting held on... Sorry, Mr. Governance. So we need to move the acceptance of the major late item. Investigation update. Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Leslie. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, abstentions carried. Thank you. Right. Follow my run sheet. Minutes of the meeting held on 18th of February 2005.
Happy to move those.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Nobby. Any discussion, amendments? Notes? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against, abstentions carried. Thank you. Moving to the minutes of the Monday the 24th of March.
Happy to move those.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Darren. Any changes, comments, typos? No. If so, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, abstentions carried. Thank you. Financial risks update. Thank you. Miles.
Miles is going to join us at the table. So the financial risks update for this meeting centres principally around our treasury risk, which gives the Q3 report from Bancorp, and Miles is here to talk to that to some extent, but he will also give an update on the happenings that have happened since the 31st of March. The markets are moving in response to some global shocks. But I do just want to, I'll start with the good news, is that we continue to remain within the Treasury policy limits. We are still watching the 2028 potential breach of not having enough fixed rate debt out of that period, and we'll continue to monitor that as we look at taking out longer debt. And there is a note there in relation to the level of procurement activity that's happening within the organisation at the moment, and that for the year to date we have entered into new contracts to the value of 122 million, and at present there is currently, the procurement team are currently working on 99 different procurement exercises across the organisation, and some of these are us contracting works for the next financial year. So our capital delivery teams are now focusing on getting the work contracted for the next financial year as well. But Miles, if you want to go into a little bit more depth.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity.
You've got to move the mics really close,
Right,
Miles.
that close? Is that better? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity of having me present today. It's always a pleasure to be in Invercargill. Now, you've got the Treasury dashboard report for the March quarter. I'll take it as read. Are there any questions on the report at all? Actually, maybe if I just make 2 points. One that Patricia mentioned was that you are totally policy compliant. We have, with all the parameters in the Treasury policy, that we have to comply with the interest rate risk management bands. That's the amount of fixed and floating rate debt, or the minimum amount, the minimum maximum amounts of fixed rate debt that you're allowed to have, the funding maturity profile, the counterparty limits, the liquidity profile as well. So you're totally policy compliant. And the other thing I would point out is that your cost of funds, which is on my report,
page 21.
3.12, it's the lowest of any local authority we're aware of. We have 38 local authorities, I think I worked out the other day, who we advise around New Zealand, anything from far north district council down to here, and you're the lowest that I'm aware of. We share the Treasury advisory space with we have one main competitor, and I don't know of any of their ones that are lower. So I'm hoping that will continue.
Grant, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's probably firstly to Patricia, and then Patricia, in the long-term plan, our average cost of funding we used was
Off
for
the
our
top of
cost
my
of
head,
capital?
I think it was 3.5 or 4.
Right, okay, thank you. So just interested, Miles, with respect to looking forward and bearing in mind Patricia's comment about us staying, within compliance around our cover. The opportunities, we've got the 43 million rolling up, in the next sort of 6 months. Where should we be looking to position that, given what's happening in global markets and treasuries in the US have up 30 points and all those sorts of good things? What's your view on where we should be trying to aim to get cover?
Yeah. At the moment, I don't know.
We won't quote you.
Obviously, it's very difficult at the moment. I mean, and actually, this will show in the presentation coming up. But I think it's interesting to note that the official cash rate at the moment is 3.5%.
Yeah.
Now, the markets were projecting it to go down to either 3 or 3.25. That was before the tariffs came in.
Yeah.
They've now readjusted that and they've put that down to 2.75%. But, interest rate swaps are higher than that.
Yeah.
But you can get a 3-year swap at about 3.4%. Sorry, a 3-year swap at about 3.4, and a 4-year swap at 3.45%.
That's without margin, though, right?
That's without the
Yeah.
margin. You've got quite a low margin, so that's adding about 30, 40 points onto that. We can't do anything about the margins. We can,
No,
because
that's right.
that's what they are. But I've had a meeting with Patricia and Nita this morning, and I mean, we were talking about it. If it was 2 weeks ago and the rates were down here for some of those rates, I would have probably said do it.
Yeah.
But at the moment, I mean, there is so much uncertainty, but one thing about uncertainty is that it does produce opportunities.
Yeah, that's right. So a very blunt policy may be that, look, if we've got a cost of funding within our long-term plan of X, then any opportunity to extend our cover as long as possible under that cost of funding is an opportunity that needs to be considered. Would that be a reasonable
Yeah, see, the problem is that the shape of the yield curve is positive sloping.
I know that. Yeah.
So we were looking at another swap, which is 3.82%. That goes out to 2031. But if that rate came down, to sort of 3.6 or so, if there was 20 points and then the sort of movements that we're getting, I mean, that's achievable. I would certainly be looking at that.
Yeah, but isn't the challenge though that, the shorter on the swap curve you've got local influence or cash rate, but longer you go out, those US treasuries and the repricing of those up influences that. So, I would look at the market and say, there's probably downward pressure on cash rate as you've highlighted, but equally there's probably upward pressure around liquidity within what's happening in the US, which will impact on those longer markets. So we need to be thinking sort of, as long as possible and taking some of the guesswork out of it by saying, well, if our cost of capital within our long-term plan is X and we can fix long from below that, then that's our guide for decision making.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we will be taking into account. And I mean, as I said to Patricia, we're probably looking at every 2 or 3 days to see if there are opportunities. But I think it's worth noting that New Zealand interest rates haven't moved up or down as nearly as far as the US. Like last night, the US 10-year Treasury bond yield came down 15 points. We came down 3, but we haven't gone up to the same extent. So it's just that we see, if we see shorter-term rates around 3.3 or longer-term rates around 3.6, then we'd probably do it. Those would be the...
And you think we'll get there in the next 6 months?
Oh, I mean, it's only 20 points away. Gosh, we can do that in a day. Yeah.
So we've got the triggers in place to be able to act. Yeah. Good.
We can act immediately, and Patricia and the rest of her team have got the authority to do it. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll let you go through your presentation slides, Miles.
Thank you.
And then we'll take further questions. And
So I'll try and go through these reasonably quickly because I mean I realise you're a wee bit stretched for time, but I just thought I'll put a couple of some relevant slides up. So this is just showing that the effects of what's been happening with tariffs over the last 100 years. So you can see since about the 1930s or so they've been coming down, and they reached a low a few years ago. There was a slight blip up, the second to last arrow on the right-hand side shows when Trump was first in, there was a modest increase in tariffs. And then you can see what's happened, and that's just in the last 2 weeks. So I think it just puts it into perspective what's happening. It's, you know, I've been in financial markets 35 years or so, and I've never seen, well, I think I've seen volatility like this once before. It's unprecedented, and the intraday swings they're getting. I mean, just to, oh, no, actually, I'll show you that in a slide on the other day. I mean, yeah, the announcements that are coming out are just, I've got to be a bit careful what I say here, but I did see he made a really important announcement last night that he was increasing the tariffs on Mexican tomatoes. So if he's getting down to that sort of detail, boy. He also actually said in an interview that he never changed his mind, he's just flexible. This is a little bit frightening, this graph, really. Moody's, you know, that's the global rating agency, their latest global business confidence survey, going back to, well, before 2003. You can see in 2009 with the global financial crisis, you know, there was a big dip in confidence, obviously, recovered sharply. Then it went down again in the pandemic. The other time it went below the line was, 2022, when they had a global, in the US they had a second-tier bank, the second-tier banking sector. Some of them went into liquidation, and that caused that. There's been a general increase in confidence, even after Trump got elected. But with the tariffs, you can see that, you know, this has had a huge effect, and, you know, it's, but I mean, you can't undo, you know, something that's been happening for 100 years in this globalisation and, you know, the alliances that have been built up since the Second World War and, and as I said, the previous chart. So it's quite scary. The next one, so the 10-year government bond yields in the US, that's the one in red. That's the global benchmark for interest rates. And you can see how it follows, the New Zealand rate follows it very, very closely. Now, I could go on for ages about this and I haven't got time. Well, you haven't got time. But you can see just at the very end on the right-hand side where rates went down. And that's when the market's focused on the downside risks to the economy of the tariffs. And the fact that it would necessitate a lower federal funds rate, lower monetary policy, lower monetary conditions, or softer monetary conditions. And then you can see that very recently, in the last week, it's gone up. Last Monday, the US Treasury, the 10-year Treasury bond yield got to 3.88%. By the next day or the day after, late the next day, it was at 4.5. I mean, I've never ever seen that. I mean, it normally does 5 points in a day. And in the space of 2 days, it did, 62 points. That's just unheard of. But one of the reasons is, and this is quite interesting, is that the US has always been seen, and I won't be spending as much time on the other charts, by the way, as this one, or possibly. The US is traditionally seen as a safe haven, the US 10-year bond rate, or US 10-year bonds, US bonds in general. And in times of economic uncertainty and stress and war, they buy US treasuries. But what they've actually started doing now is selling them because of the economic consequences for the US. So the US has sort of not been seen as a safe haven, and interestingly enough, you can see the downturn in German bond yields, the green one. So investors are moving away, diversifying out of the US, and one of the recipients of it has been German bonds, European bonds, Swiss bonds, Japanese bonds.
Yeah. So, do you want a question? So if you go back to your previous slide with the, but if, you know, the GFC, liquidity was a major issue through that, right? Is there a risk, and you know, for us, that we can get our debt away? Like, what is the risk in the market to us not being able to get our debt away?
Yeah. Well, it didn't happen in the GFC. It didn't happen in the pandemic. But the huge advantage
Well, it did in the first basis of the thing. Frontier paid, you know, 1,100 points.
Oh, sorry, I'm talking about ICC.
Yeah, no, but is there a risk that liquidity flows further through the market and comes into this market?
What? Sorry, what's this
The
market?
liquidity risk.
Yeah,
the local government.
Oh, yeah, no. The big advantage that you've got is that you're sourcing your funding from the LGFA. And the LGFA is one of the most, is held up as one of the best examples of local government funding in the world. It was based on the Nordic model and they improved on it. It's held up around the world as one of the best examples of local government funding.
So it's a low level of risk.
It's rated AAA. It has massive levels of liquidity. It has about $2 billion worth of liquidity. In other words, they have borrowed $2 billion more than they've actually lent.
Right.
They have a facility with the Debt Management Office of $600 million, which is the government, which can be increased to $1.6 billion. There are a whole lot of uncertainties.
Course,
In the pandemic, it survived through that. So you're about as de-risked as any organisation in New Zealand could be. The next one, this just shows, I mean, if anyone's wondering about why, I mean, you probably know why your KiwiSaver's going down, shows the US 10-year bond yield in red, and the Standard & Poor's, the global index, you know, the S&P 500, the US share market in the black. So normally, if one market is decreasing in value, the other increases in value. So when interest rates go down, that means bonds increase in value, and obviously when the share market goes down, the share market declines. So the share market has been going down, plus bond rates have been going up, so there's been a double whammy, and that's this selling of the US share market, but also this corresponding one that I was showing earlier of the selling of US bonds. In other words, the value of bond portfolios have been decreasing because of this de-risking out of the US. The next one, do I need to go into this? Just probably thinking about time. Look, very quickly, what it shows, it's more the bottom line, it's the easing cycles that we've had since the monetary, since the Reserve Bank used the OCR as the primary tool to manage monetary policy. We've had 200 points of easing so far. That's the second highest that we've had. That's the one in red. The only one that's been beaten by is the one in the GFC, which was 575 points. So the next one. This is probably an answer to your question, Grant. You know, it just shows what the expectations are for monetary policy. So we're at 3.5%. Markets are expecting to go down to next month to 3.25%, then to 3%, then to 2.75%. 2.75 is the low. Yesterday this was implying a 72% chance we get to 2.5, but it changes on a daily basis. But it's just showing that, look, prior to 2 weeks ago, they were thinking that the low would be 3.25%, maybe 3. As I say, it's now 2.75%. That shows the official cash rate in red, the 90-day rate in black, and then the 2-year swap rate in blue and the 5-year swap rate in green. So what we've got is, well, you can see rates are pretty much at their lows. The 2-year swap rate is at its low. You know, we can lock you in at sort of 3.25% for a short term, but it doesn't solve the long-term problem.
No, it doesn't.
So I just go back one, Patricia. So that's what we're grappling with, you know, is that positive shape of the yield curve. The next one, that does show, so that shows that you're policy compliant at the moment. The green are the interest rate swaps that you've taken out, and the blue is the fixed rate bonds. Do you want me to just briefly explain how this works, this graph?
Certainly.
So what we do is we operate within a set of interest rate parameters where you have to have minimum and maximum levels of fixed rate cover, and they're delineated by the red line. So it goes 0 to 2 years, 2 to 4, and then 4 to 10. So it shows the minimum at 40%, the maximum at 100%, then 25 to 80% in that middle 2 years, and then in the longer dated one, a minimum of 0 and a maximum of 60%, and it's predicated off the total debt level, which at the moment is 137 million. It's got a wee spike up at the beginning because, well, today you're getting 10 more million. We don't have to, from a policy compliance perspective, we don't have to do any hedging, or in other words, any fixed rate cover for another year, but we will be looking to initiate hedging, as I said, Grant, earlier on. I just thought I'd show you this, just to, it's probably pretty hard to read unless you can see it on your tablets or your laptops, but this is the This is the end of 2020, this is 30 June 2024 figures published by the LGFA. So it's got the credit ratings that applied before all the downgrades from Standard & Poor's. You didn't get downgraded because you're rated by Fitch Ratings. You have the highest possible credit rating, AA+. And the important one is the debt to revenue column, which shows that you're at 61%. So you're you're very much towards the bottom as far as the debt to revenue. The lower it is, the better. You're exactly half the average. So the average is 120%. So of debt to revenue, and you can actually go to, well, it's just been brought down to 285%. Some of the growth councils you might have read are applying for exemptions to go to 350%. So, and then the interest coverage ratios are very attractive from your perspective as well. So I just put this in to show that, look, you know, everything that you're doing in Treasury, I think, is right at the moment and correct. And I mean, if I went back, would I do anything different? No, because I mean, I think it's been proven that, you know, just by the cost of funds that you've got. Are there any questions? There's one more slide, I think. And I just thought, look, soon, if I look tired, it's because I have to wake up in the middle of every night and look at the market. So I thought I'd, and I do, I tell you. So this is interest rates going back 5,000 years. Actually, one thing I did read in the middle of the night, sorry, just 15 seconds, was that the US at the border now are checking people's phones, and if there's anything derogatory about the president, and if you've been sending derogatory texts or emails, then you can be refused entry, you can be locked up, and you can be deported on the next flight. Wow. I'm actually going there in June, so I've got to check my phone to make sure there's nothing incriminating in it. Look,
those things are happening actually at state borders too.
Yeah.
Seriously.
But I mean, the thing about it is that, this is communism. You know, Trump talks, you know, he doesn't like communism. I mean, this is exactly what he's doing. I mean, that happens in communist states.
Just note we're in a public session, so we'll take Mr. Peters' advice and just talk neutrally, will we?
It's very hard to do that when the reality is right in front of you.
Sure. Takes New Zealand to blow up the US relationship.
So what I thought, look, this is just interest rates going back 5,000 years. So a slightly light-hearted look at interest rates. It takes the dark blue is the short-term interest rates, and the purpley line is long-term interest rates, and where they get them from is the dominant era, is the dominant jurisdiction in a particular time. It goes back to the Babylonian Empire and the Byzantium Empire and the Roman Empire and the Dutch East India Company and the Bank of England, the US Federal Reserve. And what it actually shows is that it was commissioned by the Bank of England. It's 10 years ago, but I don't think 10 years doesn't really matter in this course of 5,000 years. But it shows that the peaks that we've had, and we had them in the Industrial Revolution, the 30s, and this big peak that we had just until recently, which corresponded to the biggest growth in history. Where we are now is actually really just going back to mean reversion. Yeah. But I did read, and it only takes a minute, that the first person in the world, the first ruler, was a man called Hammadi, who ruled Babylon 3000 BC. And he was the first person to introduce an interest rate. And I've got to be a wee bit careful what I say here, but I think that Babylonian times preceded gender equality in the Me Too movement. But there was a presumption that the borrower would be a male, and the male could pledge his wife, his children, and his slaves as security. In exceptional circumstances, he could charge himself as security. He could offer himself as security, but if he was offering himself as security, it was only for a maximum term of 3 years.
And what was his interest rate?
They were about, I think it was about 25% or so. But it just goes to show that, you know, by only having males being able to offer themselves security for 3 years, it just goes to show that even in Babylonian times, they were perceptive enough to realise that a male's usefulness didn't extend beyond 3 years. So I hope I haven't offended too many of the males in the room. I'm optimistic.
Thank you, Miles. Are there any further questions of Miles?
Thank you.
Look, thank you very much, certainly for explaining it in terms that we all understand. It gives us comfort that we are experiencing very low borrowing costs and that we are compliant. And I know Patricia keeps us updated with this paper at each meeting. So thank you for your time. Could I please ask someone to please move and accept the financial risks update? Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Rangi.
No. Can I ask a question? It's not of Miles. Are you about to?
Yeah, I was about to.
Yeah. Am I allowed to ask?
Yes, you are.
It's a procurement question. Obviously, we do cover procurement risks here.
Would you like to discuss that in public excluded under?
No. This is fine. Like, what I'm saying is that this is what I want to identify as a risk is a massive financial variance from the LTP potentially, and whether this committee, it's covered in this committee, and what I refer to is council's deviation from the Bluff wastewater consent and its LTP. It had the opportunity of delivering it on budget in December last year. It chose instead to effectively roll the dice and see what the new WEP regulations would be, and the grass would be greener, and effectively things would work out economically more favourable. Unfortunately, what we've seen so far, and previously in the extraordinary council meeting that preceded this meeting, we sent submissions, please, asking help. We need clarity, because at the moment it's not looking that good for our discharge consent, and it could go into tens of millions of dollars. Now, do we need to identify that as a risk? Because now we have rolled the dice, and I hate to use this phrase, we are in uncharted waters. Yeah. But so I'm just asking the chair, is that something we need to identify, because we have deviated from our LTP?
I would have thought if the risk was serious enough, then the Chief Executive would bring it to this committee's attention. Michael, is there anything you want to?
Thank you. Through yourself, Chair, look, that is, if it becomes a financial risk associated, and it would go through infrastructure and projects first before coming to this table, because as yet no decision's gone through council or that committee. Once that has occurred, then that risk will develop if there is one to bring forward to this committee. But at this stage, there's nothing yet to bring forward to this committee.
Thanks. All right, if we move to the resolution.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Leslie. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, abstentions carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Miles. Thank you. Do we have Chris online yet?
Chris is online, he should be joining us.
All right. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks, Ross. Good afternoon.
Okay, I'll kick off
Yeah.
because I think this is a double team.
Yes, you tag
As well,
team it.
we're tag teaming this. So this paper is the annual report audit plan for the June 25 annual report. We have outlined, or Chris and Trevor have outlined what their proposed areas of audit focus will be. We've had a discussion on this. This has been a joint work between the council finance team and audit about understanding the focus areas. The team are actually due in a couple of weeks' time to start the interim audit work. But probably the most important part for the committee is understanding how we're going to deal with the deadlines around the annual report this year. Because of the election and the number of councils that need to go through audit, it will be impossible for us to complete the audit of both council and the group before the election. The statutory deadline for councils to complete their annual reports are the 31st of October. Our audit is due to start at the start of September, no, start of October, I'll get this right, or towards the end of September, but the focus is initially on the holding company and its subsidiaries. So what we propose, and it's a similar process that we ran in the last triennium, was that this committee and council would get a very good draft of the council numbers and a high level draft of the group numbers to review ahead of the elections, and there will be several resolutions that they would pass forward to the new council, so that the new council coming in would have some assurances that the old council were over the annual report. We plan to have the audit complete by 31 October. So simply we are waiting for the new council to be sworn in, and it will be one of the first things on the agenda for the new council would be to adopt the annual report.
This is the same process that we followed 3 years ago.
It is. Chris, have you got anything else that you wanted to add?
Not directly in relation to that.
Or anything in relation to the annual plan? The plan for the annual report?
Happy to talk to the audit plan. Thanks, Patricia. In terms of the audit plan, it's included in your packs there from page 30, and probably the things to highlight are our key audit risks. Those are from page 32 onwards. These should seem somewhat familiar to you, and a lot of these reflect common risks within the sector. First risk there being the valuation of infrastructure assets. Again, this risk relates to those assets which are being valued this year. The valuation cycle for the current year is around roading and land and buildings that are planned to be valued. Again, focus of that is really around the key assumptions that sit under those valuations. So here we're talking about, the unit rates that are applied, the quantities that are used, and some of the subjectivity that exists in selecting some of these estimates. In addition, from the land side of things, we're talking about market information, so comparable sales data. So we've included some commentary there around the process that we're expecting around collation of information to support unit rates. And this is not something that's been new this year. It's something we did last year with the Three Waters valuation, because there's some really important information that council holds that it can be used as a good exercise in determining whether the valuation's been put together in the right way and nice and accurate, or accurate as it can be in the context of a valuation. Second risk there is the fair value assessment of infrastructure assets. So that's focusing on those revalued assets which haven't been valued, the ones that, because they're valued on a periodic cycle. Again, management performs an assessment here looking at to confirm that they haven't materially changed in value. Our focus is again on looking at the information that sits under those, like cost indices and some other information we hold, to confirm that we're comfortable with the judgments reached there. Third risks are around the fair value of investment property, similar to the fair value of infrastructure assets, but again focused on the investment property portfolio. Our focus there is an annual one on the methodology applied, which is well formed, and the reasonableness of the source data and assumptions. I think that's probably enough on that one. What's quite specific this year is the risk around the group audit matters. That's something I think you should pay attention to, and that's really in relation to the difference in the way in which ICL assets are valued within the ICHL group, and the complexity surrounding the accounting for the sale of the pylon group of entities, which is in there. Those are the two probably key group issues that we've highlighted in there. A lot of those will be resolved within the ICHL audit before they get to the council audit, but it's just here as a key because they're significant to the group. The last one I'll highlight there is that performance measure for the smooth travel exposure. This should be familiar to you. This is the matter in relation our audit report was qualified for last year. So the commentary sort of covers the areas that led to the qualification around the age of information and the process to derive traffic count estimates, and our focus for the year around that. In terms of this, we'd like to do some work earlier in the piece just to understand the systems, the estimate, and what's been done to address this, just so that we can be well prepared ahead of year end. So we're arranging that with Patricia and team. Another thing probably worth highlighting in here is a key standard change this year. So there's an audit standard change that it's not necessarily obvious on the outside, but it's quite significant to us. And that's the change in the group audit standard, which is covered on page 45. The standard one is one that's very internally focused to auditors, so it's not something, as I said, you'd readily see. The key changes here is it removes a definition we used called a significant component. Now, significant component was essentially an entity-by-entity assessment of what we considered was significant to the group audit. We don't do that anymore. We do it on an account balance and transaction type level, class of transaction type level. So it requires a lot more thorough assessment of risk and a lot more detailed assessment and documentation of those risks as well internally. There's definitely a stronger emphasis on communication, instruction and direction within the group. So there's a lot more we have to do in talking to other auditors within the group, some of those being ourselves, but some of them being external firms working on behalf of the Auditor General. So just to flag that there is some more work there in relation to these matters. I was going to cover timetable, but I think we've covered that appropriately before I spoke.
Thanks, Chris. And resourcing?
Resourcing, so our team is there, included in the, I think it's page 51 there, and the timeframes aligned with what we were talking about earlier alongside that. So sufficient resource in place as we've discussed. Ross.
Excellent, thanks. Question, Ria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to go back a tiny bit to Patricia. You gave us the outcome that the audit wouldn't be able to come back before the elections and be signed off, and the next new council would do that. And I know that we did that coming into my first triennium. And what I'm concerned about with that is because it's worked once, was that the reason because we had so many returning councillors that were experienced? I mean, is there a risk that we get brand new councillors that don't wish to actually, I mean, how do we manage that so that it's a smoother flow?
I've used it multiple times, so I
Okay.
have actually used it in other councils
Great.
as well.
So
So
there
it
was
is
one
pretty
next question.
standard across the
Absolutely.
motu. It was about briefing the incoming councillors to what they are seeing, and it'll be just part of that early induction for those that are new around the table. We will do I'll do some specific briefings with them so that they can see what they are asking to approve.
So out of all the TAs currently, how many of those work with this incoming expectation that this will be signed off?
Chris, that's probably a question for you. How many councils is the Auditor General expecting to be signed off before the elections?
I don't have that information to hand, Patricia.
Okay.
It would be a large number, given that any council with a holding company really can't approve until October.
No, that's cool.
And we want to give this assurance, we'll give the assurance to the new council that the work has been done and
Yep.
relied on.
Sure. And I just, question
Further.
number 2, just going back to page 51 of 45 of the report. And Chris, when you talked about there's a significant step in the entity by entity audit, will that impact on costings and more time as well for you to do that in such a detailed, descriptive way?
I think we've flagged there or impact on time, and I think that is naturally part of it. The extent to which that is, we've modelled across with a standard set of hours across each council. So, I'm expecting an amount more, but not heaps. I do think we are likely to end up auditing the same things. It's just going about there in a more
Different way.
systematic and detailed, risk-focused way.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
once appropriately, it's something that we can keep utilising and updating.
Thank you.
We'll ensure that anything extra is negotiated, won't we, Chris? Tom?
Probably a similar question to Ria's, but the comments that you made about the new group audit standard and the additional work involved in that. I wonder, particularly in the internal side, Patricia, if you can, can you quantify how much additional work there'll be for staff?
It's probably not as much, there'll be a little bit of additional work for council staff. It's probably more work for audit staff.
Right.
We're probably talking, until we see the information requests that probably come out of it, but there'll be more discussion required about how we've assessed risks in each of those subsidiary entities as we've rolled them up.
Okay, thank you.
Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just on that point, you know, obviously escalating costs have been a bugbear for us, Chris. Has Audit New Zealand looked at keeping the cost within the same envelope? Obviously, you've got some new standards you need to measure, and looking at where you could reduce or go to a different level of audit within some aspects of our audit to ensure you stay within the cost envelope, but you meet the new standard required, as opposed to just cost creep.
Sorry, there wasn't unmuting there. Look, there's definitely a strong focus on cost control and time control and doing things efficiently within the right hours. This is a new international standard, but equally, you know, we've got new technology, we're looking at other ways in which we can do things more efficiently. So it's an organisational focus. We can't control international standards being imparted on us, but we can control our effort of what we do within those and the way in which we risk assess. So, I mean, that's our focus, really.
Yeah, but isn't it, there'll be some things within the audit that you've touched a number of times, and you know, you can do a lighter touch on those aspects to get assurance that things are in place because you've done a lot of work on them in the past, and then you pick up this new focus.
I haven't done, I wouldn't say there's anything that we do that is clear that we can say is unnecessary or can't be done this year from the past. I mean, we are literally looking at every individual balance and bit of work that we do and trying to get that down to the right amount of work relative to the risk of the balance. Okay. There's no real option there just to opt out of some of that year to year.
Which, no, I've got another question. I'm just trying to think about how I comment. But anyway, want to move to the difference in the valuations. So does Audit New Zealand see differences in the valuation for infrastructure across the country? So, for example, where roading is much more difficult in some locations, you would expect the cost of roading and that to reflect through, as opposed to in Invercargill, where a nice smooth, flat place, our roading costs should be a lot lower. Do you see that reflecting through in the valuations?
You will, because when you undertake an infrastructure valuation like that, that is depreciated replacement cost, it should be reflective of local cost conditions. So when done appropriately, using the right information, it will reflect your local conditions. So that's all part of this information that I'm wanting to be collected internally that my team can use to substantiate the valuation, particularly around unit rates.
So you do confirm that there is a difference in cost of roading in some parts of New Zealand versus others?
Well, there's naturally a difference based on topography, all sorts of things, climate. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, cool. Okay, thank you.
Rangi.
Now, thanks, Chair. My question is, is the annual report dependent on council adopting the annual plan on time? Are the two things related?
Through you, Chair. No, they're not.
They're not. Cool.
Ria.
Thank you, Chris. On page 40 of the draft, under the heading Legislative Compliance, I noticed the commentary down the bottom that says Invercargill City Council should continue to review the legislative disclosure requirements and check that these are accurate and complete. Is there a concern from you? I mean, I know you don't cover all areas that you've mentioned, but is there something in particular that has drawn you to this determination?
No, I think that's a standard piece of wording that we would have. I do note this is a new form template, so that might be why it's more prominent this time around. I think, you know, this is just highlighting that there are disclosures that come from legislation and that it's important that we comply with those. Patricia and team are well aware of what those are, and that's really just highlighting that.
Thank you.
I take it there are no further questions. Patricia, just want to highlight the item that we covered off from the last meeting in respect of negotiated fees.
So at the last meeting of risk insurance, the issue of the additional fee for the LTP audit was raised, and it was left for myself and the chair to have a discussion with Chris. That discussion has happened, and we have agreed a additional fee of $21,000. I think the original request was up to 25,000, so we've a reduction in that. So that will be that will settle the LTP audit outstanding.
That's great news.
Well, I did try harder, but it
With
was on
something,
Friday.
though.
But negotiation. Look, thank you, Trevor and Chris, and we look forward to working with you through this year's audit through to sign off. Appreciate that. Have someone please move that we receive the report, annual report audit plan, and note the detail. Thank you, Ria. Thank you, Tom. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, abstentions carried. Thank you very much.
I'll also move the recommendation to council, Chair.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Darren. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, abstentions carried. Thank you very much. All right, health, safety and wellbeing update. Tash, welcome. And Richard.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for your paper. Take it as read if there's anything you wish to comment and highlight for the committee, and then we'll take questions.
Yeah, I just want to highlight feedback from last meeting, and you'll find on page 60 or 7 of 8 of our side of it that we've put in there the EAP work personal breakdown. Just of note with that, this is based on the first time contact that an individual has. An example of that is I might contact them, it could be over grief. I might contact, so that would be put down as personal. I could contact them in a year's time, it could be over my workload. That would still be recorded as personal. We're currently working with our data provider to see if this can be a simple movement of data to give us some different reporting. The other thing that I want to highlight is that we've had a lot of mind health resilience training, and we've had really good feedback from that. It's from Warn International, who you might know as Lance Beddoe. So, and I think that's actually reflected in our people in the way that they are dealing with things, because we have actually had a drop in some of the incident reporting. So, open to questions?
Thank you. Tom.
It's pleasing to see the amount of participation in health and safety meetings and so forth. Can I just ask, when I see that there are a number of health and safety representatives which exceeds, as it says here, the legislative requirements, are there an appropriate number of, I'm going to call it blue-collar representatives, because I don't know quite what the other expression is now, but you know what I mean. So to what extent is it blue-collar as opposed to white-collar?
Okay, so actual managers, so this is not general managers?
No, speak into the...
Sorry. Lower than general managers, we have 2 managers, so the tier 3s that are HSRs, the rest are frontline workers.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks for that report on the EAP stuff. So there'll be some areas of our business that will have a higher propensity for stress. You'd expect customer-facing roles,
Yeah.
quite possibly. So is that training and development being focused on those areas, you know, initially, or at a more intense level to reflect the environment they're working in? how are we approaching that training and upskilling?
Through you, Chair. So our first lot of rollout went right down into the customer services people, seeing as they are our frontline staff.
Yeah.
So we've given it to them first, and our wardens and the library people. So
Yeah.
those are the first ones. That's why you'll see there's a high participation
Yeah.
rate at the moment. It's
Yeah.
because just about all of them have absorbed the opportunity to do this and
Yeah.
partaken in it. This is now going to be rolled out to, I think, all staff, because I mean, we all come across different parts in our day-to-day work, some more than others. But I think if we have this in our kitty of wellbeing, it's an excellent opportunity to give to all of our staff.
Yeah. Yeah, if I can, so what would be good to see the closing of that loop would be feedback from the staff participating in around the impact it's having, you know, and
Yeah.
anecdotal would be probably so as a result of the training that they've had, what's the positive impacts it had on the role they're doing or the way they're feeling about what they're doing. Just for us to be assured the training's having an impact in the way we want it to, I think that'll be a good close of loop. Yeah. Secondly, with respect to the contractor management, so site audits, which is great to see you doing. So with the 8 corrective actions, what would you expect to see? So what's the benchmark for corrective action you'd see across site visits? Would it be that's what, 10% corrective action, isn't it? How does that relate to, what's the correlation between, what's seen in other sectors or across other councils around, are our contractors, compliant because they've got 8 corrective actions, or is that too many or too few? We're not picking up enough. I'm just trying to understand, the data.
Yeah, I don't have us in comparison of others. I can just say that some of those corrective actions are minor, like the hazard board that's outside may have the wrong date on it. This is how tough our contract managers are getting.
Yeah.
But no, so I can't tell you what the benchmark is.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can find out, but I would definitely speak to some other councils to see what they're doing in that area.
Yeah, because I mean the risk is that you sort of with this type of, you see that and say, well, that's okay, but you don't know the relativity of it, and we might not be finding enough actions that are in breach of our health and safety program, or we may be reassured that we are finding them consistently. And it's just to try and get that reassurance. So, thank you.
I'll reach out and get some benchmarks for you.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. Ria.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Tash, I'm just looking at pages 62 and 63 of your report, and one of them is the dashboard. And I'm hoping you'll help me understand what this is telling me, because I don't quite understand some of the acronyms that are there. On the first one there, for the lead indicators, the safety audits completed. So I note that our audits being completed have gone down, but the contractors have stayed quite on the same level right throughout the period from January to March. Is that because they are quite often looking and mitigating those issues on site, or is it that they have a process that's done daily to notify any safety concerns? And ours obviously is tracking down, which is quite good to see. Is that how I'm understanding it?
Sorry, through you. So what those ones there are audits that our site, so the orange line, is our contractors, contract managers who have been out on site and they are focusing on a safety audit. The ones that come through from the contractor is, my understanding, it's what's written into their contract. They will perform 2 10 safety audits per month and stuff like that. So that's when they're auditing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's how that was. Sorry, what was the other one you want to understand?
So there's in the dashboard, or health and safety dashboard, underneath it, you've got looks like a mileage thing, like a cars used to read like. What does a TRIFR mean, and what does a ARIFR mean?
They're big things. Total recordable injury frequency rate. So that's how many people you are hurting.
Right.
So a total recordable injury frequency rate, it's a standard benchmark used in health and safety, and that means that you've hurt them to the point of a medically treated injury, a lost time injury, something like that, something quite severe.
Okay.
Currently,
So
Right,
ours is
zero.
currently 3.58,
that is.
or is that the standard?
That, yeah, so that's our
Okay.
benchmark, and that's benchmarked against the whole of New Zealand across just about every sector that there is. So that's our benchmark for that. And the other one is all recordable injury frequency rate. So that includes your first aids, your sticky plasters and stuff like that.
Okay, that kind of brings it into better context now that I know what that means. Thank you. And then just on page 63, the contractor assessment scores with the coloured keys that run across the top. Can you just talk me through that? Because we've got 1 at red, 11 at green, and 17 at that colour. What is that telling me? What's it meant to tell me?
So those ones there, this comes from Sitewise, who are
Right.
just kind of like the standard across New Zealand
Oh, okay.
for pre-qualifications. So if you are a gold member with them,
Mhm.
you are up there in the top percent, and I think that's from 95 to 100% is what you've scored in your health and safety systems.
Okay.
The green is 75 to 94. The red, the one that we have in red, that person is just submitted, they're not assessed yet, so that's why
Right.
they're sitting in the red. Yeah.
Okay.
And on the other side is all the contractors in New Zealand that belong to Sitewise.
So it's a comparable.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
okay.
it's a scale range.
Thank you. Thank
Thanks.
you very much.
Nobby.
Yeah, just three things really. Does the scope of your work include the staff satisfaction survey work?
No, sorry, that's part of PNC.
That's all right, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one comment or suggestion from me. I sit on the council of another large organisation. As governors, every time there's a notifiable event, we get notified immediately of that, the issue and what's been done, within 24 hours. Is that something that would be useful? And it's not for council to do or the committee to do anything about, but certainly awareness of each notifiable event. As a suggestion.
Yep, definitely. If we have a notifiable event, we can get that communicated out.
Yep.
Grant.
Yeah, well, just on that, there would be some criteria to that, wouldn't it? Well, we don't want to know that someone's tripped over a stone in the street, but
No,
if someone's got pretty close to sort of
something
taking
that's got to
their
be
life.
notifiable.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a work
so
safe.
that's
Work
classified.
Yeah, work safe.
Work safe
classification.
notification.
Yeah. You ring this all the
So,
time.
Michael.
Through yourself, Chair, that's something that would go through myself through to the council. I'm happy to bring that into play. We haven't had a significant amount of notifiable events, so there hasn't been a lot coming through, but most have actually been reported through to council, probably not being tagged as being notifiable. We've just tagged the event through to council, so going forward we will be very clear in relation to what is and isn't a notified event.
Thank you. Will someone please move the receiving the report and the recommendation to council in one? Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Tom. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, abstentions carried. Thank you, Tash and Richard. From the chair, I'll move the end of the public session and move to public excluded for the reasons outlined. Thank you, Leslie. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, abstentions. And Pani, I note you're signing off now. Thank you.